If harmony is the single most important metric for facial beauty, then why can some faces have a high harmony score and still look bad? You might go on to blame features, but then that leaves us with morphs that have perfect features and perfect harmony, but a lot of the times they end up looking uncanny. That opens up other questions like, why do PSL morphs look so uncanny? Why does the pretty girl you see at school look better than the supermodel on TV? And why do some plastic surgeries look artificial while others look perfectly natural? All of this can be explained by what we're going to talk about in this video. Before we start, I want to define some terms so that way we all know exactly what we're talking about. So the first one is edges. These are sharp transitions between features. For example, the eyes are separated by the cheeks with a sharp edge. Gradients are smooth transitions between color, luminance, or saturation. For example, going from the top of the cheek down the bottom of the cheek is going to be a gradient, and that's going to create the contour of the cheeks. And the last one is texture, which is just the fine details and sharpness in an image. For example, your skin can have texture. Now, the problem with facial harmony is calculated by ratios and angles formed by points on the face. These points are often placed on the edges of facial features. Therefore, harmony measures the position of edges. A face can have high harmony and still look bad if the other part of the face is off, the gradients. Even if the landmarks are perfect, if the gradients are off, the face will look uncanny. For a face to be beautiful and naturally beautiful, the gradients of the face must look natural. So what causes gradients in the first place? Gradients in a face are caused by geometry, and I'll give you a very good example here. So in a picture, a circle and a sphere have the exact same outline, or like the exact same edge. But your brain can recognize a sphere because of the gradients on its surface. Your brain uses gradients to calculate geometry. The gradients of a face are used to calculate the geometry of the transition zones between features. Now, I actually have a very good example to demonstrate this. So, I created two edits in Photoshop of this picture of my face. What you might notice immediately about them is that one of the edits looks natural and the other edit looks a little bit uncanny. Now for simplicity, I'll refer to the edit that looks uncanny as the bad edit and the edit that looks natural as the good edit. Now I actually took both of these edits and I put them into Face IQ Labs to get the harmony score. And what's interesting is the Face IQ harmony score for the bad edit is actually higher than the good edit. But the bad edit still looks uncanny, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that I can only move pixels in the XY plane inside of Photoshop, but in real life, the face is a 3D object. So what that means is that changes in the XY position on the face actually include changes in the Z direction. Now, because an image is flat, your brain uses gradients to infer geometry in the Z direction. In the uncanny edit, there's more ideal edges, which is where the harmony landmarks are placed, but the gradients still belong more to the original photo. And this creates a mismatch between the gradients and the edges of the face, and that's where the uncanniness is coming from. Now, in the natural looking edit, I was able to control the gradients much more precisely, and this control of the gradients creates the illusion of Z-plane displacement. And what this did is it allowed me to make the changes in the XY direction match the Z-plane geometry, and this match is what makes the edit look natural. By the way, if you want me to make an edit of your own face just like that one, along with a full breakdown of how to achieve that look in real life based on your own anatomy, then click the link in the description to learn more. Now, the gradients of a face make a huge difference to how attractive it looks, specifically how natural it looks. And we can explore this with two examples. So the first one is Zac Efron, specifically Zac Efron after he got plastic surgery. And this would be an example of bad facial gradients. And the other example is Francisco Lachuowski, and this would be an example of having good gradients. Now, one thing I want to point out about facial gradients is that they are extremely subtle. If we go back to the example of Francisco Lachuowski and we compare the highlights to the shadows on his face, we can find that they're actually extremely similar. Now, the reason facial gradients are so subtle is because the soft tissue transition zones do not protrude or cave in dramatically on a normal human face. This is partly because the soft tissue rounds out and fills out your face, and this is mostly coming from fat. In fact, fat in the face is a sign of youthfulness, and that's because you tend to lose fat in your face as you age. And as you probably know, youthfulness is a sign of fertility, and that's part of the reason why we're biologically attracted to faces with a healthy amount of fat. Now, this quality of facial gradients is why some plastic surgeries look really uncanny, and there are 3 examples that I want to go over. So the first one is Zac Efron. So what he did is he got filler, and he ran into a very common mistake with filler, which is he injected too much, and this is called overfilling. What this did is it created bloating in his cheeks and his jaw, and it also led to another problem, which is migration. So basically, he had too much mass put in his face, and then that mass migrated to areas where he didn't want it. And basically what this did is it created too much protrusion of the soft tissue relative to facial features like the eyes and the nose. And so as light catches his face, it casts an unnatural gradient which your brain reads as bloated. And this is not normal of a human face, which is why it made him look less attractive. Now with Ariana Grande, she actually had the opposite problem. So what she had was a buccal fat removal procedure, and she did this to try and get hollow cheeks. And what this did is the removal of the buccal fat made her cheeks too depressed. And what that did is it makes her look aged, since fat in the cheeks makes you look more youthful. But then you might ask, well, why didn't she get hollow cheeks? And the reason is her bone structure is too soft to support hollow cheeks, which is why it looks unnatural. So basically, here's how hollow cheeks works. Hollow cheeks don't come from the cheeks being sunken. Hollow cheeks come more from having prominent cheekbones, a big jaw, and outwardly rotated gonions. So what this does is it stretches the skin across hard anchor points, and it casts a subzygomatic shadow, but the transition still stays smooth. Now the last example is a looksmaxer who goes by the name Lanoob. So looking at him in motion, we can see that his face changed a lot from how it looked before. But some things still look off about his face, specifically his lower eyelid and his eyebrows. So what this guy did is he got full facial implants. So he got supraorbital implants, infraorbital and cheek implants, and he got jaw angle implants. Now he actually admitted to this, but basically his cheek implants were too big, and what this is doing is it's pulling on the lower eyelid in a way that the soft tissue can't tolerate. Similarly, the supraorbital region is stretching the soft tissue and the muscles around the eyebrows in a way that makes them look not relaxed. Now, if we look at some of his photos, he does look a lot better in them, and I'll explain why that is later. So now that we have a solid understanding of facial gradients, let's answer the question, why do PSL gods look so uncanny? Now, it's because they have unnatural gradients. For example, the cheeks have a really strong shadow, which signals to your brain that there's a depression there, and this depression is really unusual on a human face. A lot of the times, the photos shared in Looks magazine forums are edits of real faces, and these edits run into the same Z-plane issue that I described earlier. When they make the edits, they don't control the facial gradients in a way that warrant the changes in the XY features. And that mismatch is what's creating the uncanny result. Another reason is that people who rank highly on the PSL scale often have extreme features, but extreme features are not actually ideal. Averageness is a quality that contributes to attractiveness, and this has been proven with multiple studies. Extreme features, particularly protrusions and depressions in the soft tissue transition zones, create extreme shading. And this extreme shading looks striking, but it also looks a little bit uncanny. So the problem isn't that harmony doesn't work, it's that harmony is an incomplete measurement. A face can have impressive ratios and angles, but if the gradients still imply unnatural geometry, your brain will still read it as wrong. Now let's go back to the Lanoob example. His photos look good, but his in-motion shots look strange. This is because of lighting. Facial gradients come from geometry, but they also come from lighting. In normal daylight, light hits the face from every direction because light is diffused by the atmosphere and it reflects off of objects. In a studio setting, lighting can be controlled. This allows photographers to manipulate the facial gradients to give the most flattering angle. This also allows people to fraud in their photos, and frauding basically just means faking how attractive you are. That's why someone can look good in photos and look bad in real life, and it's also why models can look perfect in photo shoots but look a lot more normal than expected in real life. Good aesthetic analysis requires keeping both reference frames in mind. So here's the key takeaway for looksmaxers. You can't rely on one benchmark to determine how you should looksmax. Harmony is a useful tool, but it's still only one of many that needs to be used to make a proper diagnosis of your face. Optimizing too much for one score, like a harmony score, often leads to uncanny results because you completely neglect an equally important benchmark like facial gradients. That's why a holistic analysis is extremely important. It can mean the difference between a successful glow up and a botch. And at the end of the day, successful looks maxing should improve your ability to attract the people you wish to be attracted to you. And failure to do that means a failure of the system you use to diagnose yourself. And if you want an analysis of your own face that keeps these principles in mind, I offer it, and you can find out more linked below. So to summarize these ideas, some faces can have a perfect harmony score and still look bad because harmony only measures points and it completely neglects gradients. And gradients will tell you about the geometry of the transition zones of the face, particularly protrusions and depressions. Bad gradients make a face look uncanny because they signal unusual geometry of the transition zones of the face, and unusual geometry signals a deviation from the average. This can make a face look less attractive because averageness is a marker of attractiveness and genetic normalcy, and neglecting gradients, transition zones, and averageness can lead to botches. So to properly looks max, you must approach aesthetics from a holistic level. Use the tools when they're useful, but also know when a tool is limited and how to properly compensate for that. And if you don't want to spend hours learning that yourself, I offer paid analysis along with free resources which you can access in my school group linked below.